aces that day. That's 5 planes shot down. It was truly an amazing day and became known as the Marianas. You got it, turkey shoot. The news of what was happening spread all over the ship. We were all very excited and watched the F-6F Hellcat pilots return to our ship. After they landed and taxied forward on the flight deck, the pilot would hold up the fingers indicating how many planes shot down. I saw several with 2 and with 3 as they taxied forward toward the island. Later we were told that 2 of our new aces, Ensign Wilbur Webb and Lieutenant Riesinger, were both aces that day. Webb shot down 6 planes and 1 probable and was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. He had a famous radio message: "I'm on the south end of Guam and I've got about 40 Japanese planes surrounded. I could use some help." His nickname, as you can imagine, was the name Webb of Spider. Hornet's record that day was 1 carrier and 3 oilers sunk, and 1 battleship, 2 carriers, and 3 destroyers damaged. It was becoming very evident that our Group 2 was an outstanding unit. We were the flagship, Task Force 58.1, with Admiral Jocko Clark on board. This guy was amazing. He was of Cherokee Indian descent. Had stories about him. He was the youngest rear admiral at that time. They called him the Patton of the Pacific. He was super aggressive. We were now operating out of Ulithi, south of Guam, and 1,200 miles from Iwo Jima in the Philippine Islands. This would become the largest fleet anchorage in the world. By now, VF-2 was the top fighter squadron in the fleet. 28 of its 50 pilots were aces. In September, we traveled to Manus in the Admiralty Islands and dropped off Air Group 2 and picked up Air Group 11. Let me tell you another story. I went with a shipmate to take a piece of equipment to the beach. And as we traveled in that small boat with ships everywhere in that big harbor, we passed by a hospital ship about a quarter of a mile on our port side. We got even with it. I saw a nurse, neat and trim in her uniform, came out on the fantail and walked up to the railing. She made a very feminine gesture. She patted her hair. We had been at sea for 6 months. I am 19 years old with more hormones than I know what to do with. I leave it to your imagination how I felt at that time. I've never forgotten it. And this was in 1944. With the new air group aboard, we as a task force focused on raiding the Japanese defenses in the Philippines. This led to the invasion of Leyte Island. A new Japanese unit began in the central Philippines. I'm going to say a name that you will remember. It was called the One-Way Suicide. It was called the Kamikaze. Over 300 ships would be hit by this unit before the end of the war. Admiral Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief Pacific, said later that the Kamikaze unit was the only unexpected happening during the war. We were pretty much prepared for the rest. In February of 1945, our Group 11 departed after adding the Hornet's combat record in a mighty way. 10 Navy crosses and various awards and medals. Our Group 17 reported on board and stayed with us until June 45. An important mission occurred when Hornet planes bombed targets in Tokyo, the first carrier-based air raid since the Doolittle raid 3 years earlier. In April 1945, the Japanese sent out the Yamada, the world's largest battleship, on a super suicide mission. Planes from the Hornet were the first to attack, as usual. Over 200 aircraft were involved in this mission, hit by 4 torpedoes and 3 bombs from the Hornet planes, and other hits by other American planes helped sink her. By the middle of April, Hornet and Task Force 8 had been on station for over 2 months. Beginning of the war, you did a mission and you went all the way back to Pearl Harbor. And later, as we marched across the Pacific, the bases got closer and closer to Japan and further away from Pearl Harbor. And then someone came up with the idea we send everything out to where the fleet is, they won't have to come back. So we took oilers with us from day one. But then they began to send out ammo ships, put the lines across and bringing bombs aboard. Then they would send their grocery ship. I think the war continued, we'd still be out there. But anyway, middle of April, Hornet and Task Force had been on the station, as I said, for 2 months. Everyone was tired and worn out, the pilots flying, and the ship's crews working overtime to keep the pressure on the enemy. Every day, at least one ship was being hit. The commander of the Air Force screen in Task Force 58.1 sent Admiral Jocko Clark a message. See Hebrews 13, verse 8. Clark read the passage in his Bible and circulated it into the fleet. It read, Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. In May, we provided air support for our troops landing on Okinawa. Many of our ships were hit by kamikaze attacks. Our troops were ashore and we had to stay and protect them. Several kamikaze planes crashed so close to the Hornet that they splashed water on our ship. We were the only large carrier not hit by a bomb or kamikaze, and we were under attack 59 times. In June, we encountered a massive typhoon. 100-foot waves and 110 knots of wind did what the enemy could not do. 40 feet of our forward flight deck collapsed as we struggled to survive. Our task force went back to Lady Gulf for some R&R. There we were told that the Hornet would return to San Francisco for repairs. After 15 months of combat, Hornet left the war zone with an unmatched record for carrier operations. Our scoreboard is on display at the Naval Air Museum in Pensacola. Our 3 air groups, 2, 11, and then 17, left a terrific record. Of 6,000 plus planes shot down during the war, over 600 of them, in other words 10%, were shot down by Hornet pilots. One ship contributed that much. This ship made a difference in the Pacific in World War II. Now, Hornet went into dry dock at Hunters Point Yard in July of 45. I was home on leave when the war ended. 3,500 bunks, 5 high, were built covering all of the hangar deck. There, all the way forward, nothing but bunks. Hornet became part of the magic carpet. The ship was used to bring troops home. Hornet made 5 magic carpet troops to Guam and Pearl Harbor. I left the ship in November of 1945 here at Alameda. Men and women, I come home. After serving on this great ship for 2 years, most of the time in the war zone, lasting memories of bonding with fellow shipmates have created lifelong friendships. Again, we honor today our departed shipmates and the memory of this great ship. Long live the Hornet. Thank you.
Thank you, Clyde. As always, a very nice set of remarks. We will now have our bell ceremony. Stewart, Kerr. This is a ceremony, as you can see from your program there, for the departed shipmates.
These will be for the departed shipmates since our last reunion. The bell ceremony. The toll of the ship's bell reminds us of the reverence we owe to our departed shipmates and those who guard the honor of our country upon the sea, the air, and upon the forgotten soil. Let it be a reminder of the faith they confide in us. Let us who gather here not forget our obligations. And in silent breath, a prayer to our absent shipmates. Father, give us your grace and wisdom so that in the years ahead we may seek, find, and do your will. Amen. From CB8, Ralph Cotton. From CV8, Landon D. Walker. From CV12, James Armstrong. Robert Dersfeld, Rear. Glenn Hammond. Henry Kowalski. Lieutenant J.G. Keith Messinger. Doyle D.C. Bryson. James Gerloff. Harry D. Jones. F. Glenn Lemoyne. Captain Theron Jack Taylor. Rear Admiral Edwin Wilson. From hull number CBA 12, Robert E. Fuller. Arthur Jackson. From hull number designation CBA and CBS 12, Frederick Stow. The following individuals, we had no record of the hull number that they served under. Carmen Ball.